One of the best advantages to developing for the Game Boy era back in the day was the ability to create fun gimmicks to incorporate into games. At the very start, the link cable allowed for enjoyable head-to-head handheld gaming even as early as with Tetris. Then later we saw cartridges with built-in accelerometers and rumble for Kirby Tilt and Tumble and Pokemon Pinball respectively. Those ideas carried forward into the Game Boy Advance generation, but also a fresh one found its way onto the GBA scene. If you clicked on this video, then you already know I'm talking about Boktai, The Sun Is In Your Hand. The game was conceptualized by Hideo Kojima, famous for his time developing games at Konami, including the stealth-heavy Metal Gear series. Back before we all became briefly obsessed with running outside to catch Pokemon in augmented reality, Kojima had landed on that same idea to get players outdoors, specifically to utilize the rays of the sun. Hence, the inspiration to design a special sun-censoring cartridge was born. In English, the game's title was abbreviated from Boktai no Taiyu, which translates to Our Sun. You play as Solar Boy Django, the protagonist in this story, aided by Master Otenko, a solar entity in the form of a talking sunflower. Together, your goal is to explore various dungeons, defeating villains known as Immortals in order to prevent the end of the world, but it also mixes in a little bit of family drama. As a vampire hunter, Solar Boy Django's weapon of choice is the Gun del Sol, which is what you'll use as you sneak around through dungeons, evading or blasting away various enemies. But what I appreciated here is that the main focus is not necessarily on offense. See, despite being armed throughout your playthrough, you're encouraged to do a lot of your maneuvering via quietly slipping past enemies. Django has the ability to hug walls to avoid detection, and depending on the environment, while hugging said walls, he can also knock to draw attention and use that distraction to go from room to room. It's a very crafty mechanic, which as I teased earlier, borrows from Metal Gear Solid. After a dungeon is completed, your speediness and success in avoiding detection will result in a ranking. If you can avoid being spotted entirely and reach the end quickly, you may achieve an S ranking, which is the best. Unfortunately for me, I found myself being very impatient and often brute forcing my way through. And although my completion rankings weren't good, I still managed to complete the dungeons. So how exactly does the sunlight mechanic work in Boktai? Well, as you've already learned, there's a sun sensor built into the specially designed cartridge as well as a real-time clock that runs on battery power. The game has a day and night cycle broken up into dawn, daytime, dusk, and nighttime. At the bottom right corner of the screen, you'll see your solar gun gauge. Anytime your cartridge can detect sunlight, this gauge will rise. The stronger the light, the higher it goes. Instead of traditional ammo, your Gun del Sol will utilize the gauge for firepower. If you run out, then you won't be able to use it until you can refill. The sensor is enabled anytime Django is outside of dungeons. There is also an exception to this. Within any dungeon, if a skylight happens to appear and the sensor is registering light, Django can step into it and replenish the gauge. Pretty neat, huh? As impressive as all that is, the downside is it makes Boktai a whole lot more unplayable at night or in the dark. Thankfully, there are green-colored solar stations hidden throughout dungeons that can bank sunlight you can transfer from in emergency situations. You can also increase the volume of the gauge as you discover battery upgrades along the way. Let's talk about offense. Throughout the dungeons in the city of Istrakhan, chests will appear. They can contain all sorts of items and consumables. In special green chests, you can find lenses and frames that determine what the Gun del Sol can do. Frames serve as the type or element like soul or fire or ice, for example. But lenses determine the shot and spread like automatic, rotating, or widespread, just to name a few. Also in chests are different types of grenades that can knock enemies unconscious or even apply straightforward damage. These can be very helpful when in a bind or facing a handful of enemies at once. These enemies, like the box or golems or mummies, also will vary in elemental typing, so swapping your frames to utilize different ones will work to your benefit. There are nearly 30 total dungeons in this game, and I actually didn't realize they were not all required to beat the main campaign. However, exploring all the dungeons is the best way to ensure you obtain as many upgrades as possible to really round out your arsenal. While I was making my way through different areas, one thing that really stuck out to me was the soundscape of Boktai. The music itself isn't going to blow you away, even though I felt the themes aligned well with the environments and atmosphere. However, one thing I really enjoyed were the various sound effects and voice clips, and there are several, including the infamous as well as a few others. Here, check them out for yourself. After completing the Bloodrust Mansion in the early game, you can unlock the Solar Tree, which is looked after by Lita, the Earthly Maiden. This is a great feature because as the game goes on, the Solar Tree allows you to farm those consumables I mentioned. For example, the green and red apples provide small and medium health recovery respectively. Each farming slot asks for 2 items, so if you were to combine a green and red apple, it will grow a gold apple for large health recovery. And there are many combinations you can farm on top of that. Other useful consumables include certain stat buffing nuts. Let's see, you've got the Solar Nut, Tiptoe Nut, Flame Nut, Ice Nut, See All Nut, Speed Nut, Peanut. You get the picture. After planting your crops, it will take a little time for the results to be ready. The idea is while you're out and about slaying dungeons, they are growing behind the scenes. After you leave a dungeon, you might see a quick dialog box indicating they're ready to be retrieved. As far as accessing the Solar Tree, you can consume a solar leaf to fast travel straight to it for convenience. Speaking of travel, I struggled a little bit interpreting the map which is in the menu. And unfortunately, you can't just pick a place and fast travel right to it. Fortunately, you can unlock entrance and exit warp spots that allow you to quickly bypass completed dungeons. Another aspect of Boktai that really impressed me is the amount of content there is. As I mentioned, not every dungeon is required, but exploring the entire map will result in you in obtaining all of the upgrades and collectibles. After finishing the main campaign, a hard difficulty will be unlocked as well as New Game Plus. There is an optional dungeon called Azure Sky Tower in which when accessed will reward you with an emblem. There are 6 other emblems that can be acquired, and that's where the multiplayer angle comes into play. Originally, the expectation was that Boktai players would unite and trade these different emblems with each other for additional credit, and ultimately enough emblems would grant access to more floors in the tower. After progressing up to the 99th floor, a duel with the silvery white knight can be unlocked, which awards a special guardian frame. I'll admit, that is a pretty cool prize, albeit the amount of effort necessary seems pretty demanding. I also learned players can link up and even battle each other to win solar energy, which sounds fun. I think the most disappointing thing about Boktai in 2025 is accessibility. Due to the unique nature of the cartridge, used copies of the game alone can run upwards of $100. So needless to say, it's not collector friendly. And due to the sunlight mechanic, there hasn't been any type of digital re-release of the game that reworks this. The only saving grace is a homebrew developer by the username of Prof9 created a patch for Boktai that enables manual manipulation of the solar gauge. While I realize this eradicates the authenticity established by the original software, I always feel it's better to have any way of playing than not at all. So if you're accepting of this, defaulting to the solar patch is your way to go. Link is in the description. Against these odds, Boktai has managed to cement a decent legacy for itself on the Game Boy Advance as it spawned 2 GBA sequels and a Nintendo DS entry called Lunar Nights. I also stumbled upon a fan-made spin-off called Kura 5 for PC that can sync to real-time local weather updates, which is super cool. So to answer the question, will we ever see Boktai again? It's difficult to say. I feel like the capability is there for Nintendo to make it happen, but it doesn't seem like they are interested, which is a bummer because the series holds up well in my opinion. Like most games I cover on this channel, the pixel art has aged well and there are many portable options that can run Boktai, so I implore more retro gamers to give it a look. With the Switch 2 having launched this year, maybe we'll get lucky and Boktai makes a comeback on it, or at the very least get added to the online service. Let me know if and how you've played Boktai, whether you own an original copy or took advantage of the patch. Leave a comment below. In a slight twist, I'm ending this video with the Boktai Game Over music, which might be my favorite Game Over music of all time. Enjoy and thanks for watching.